Hi, everybody. Lynn Burkhead of MajorLeagueFishing.com, sitting with one of the best anglers on the planet these days, Brandon Palaniuk. And Brandon, boy, you kind of taken the fishing world by storm in recent years. And one reason that you have, you're not really a true West Coast guy in that you're from Idaho. That's not really West Coast, but it is Western U.S.
Yeah.
And you definitely have one of the Western techniques under your belt. You love big swim baits. Let's talk about swim baits. I'm a Texas guy.
Yeah.
We don't throw swim baits a lot in North Texas where I live.
You should.
Tell me why.
Well, we actually I just got done fishing a tournament at Lake Fork.
I remember.
And a swim bait played a role for me. You know, I mean, I had 26 plus pounds a day and still finished 16th place. But, I mean, it was 26 pounds a day, right? I mean, a big key player was this one right here. And you show that to a lot of people outside of California, outside of Idaho, and people think you're nuts.
Right.
You know, they're like, there's no way that a fish can fit that inside their mouth. But I promise you.
Oh, I know they can fit it inside their mouth. My problem when Lake Fork is what I consider one of my home waters. I live about 90 miles away. I know how much that bait costs or thereabouts.
True.
And throwing it in a timber-infested hole like Lake Fork is a good way to get heartbreak for a guy like me.
Well, the good thing about this bait is really most of the time I'm fishing this in less than 8 foot of water. So if you got to go swimming for it, you can hold your breath long enough to go get it.
There are gators in Lake Fork.
Well, true, gators. But I promise you, I would swim with gators to get this bait back. I've had this same one for about 2 years. It's got, you couldn't even count the amount of teeth marks on it. And, you know, a bass is an opportunistic feeder. And so they get fat for a reason, and it's because they eat a lot. But they don't want to move a lot to eat a lot. You know? And so a swim bait will give them that, you know, kind of that opportunity where a big fish, you know, a 7, 8, 9, 10 pounder will see a swim bait, you know, just kind of nice and easy, gradually swimming by them, and they think, man, I can catch that and I can eat that, and I might not have to eat for a little while, you know, and they can just kind of relax. And a thing with a big swim bait, it's got what I call draw power, right? And so you're playing with the emotions of the fish, because even if they're not hungry, they will follow a swim bait because, you know, they're an opportunistic feeder, and they think that they need to check it out just to make sure that they don't need to eat it. And so a lot of times you'll be able to get them, they'll come up behind this bait and they'll be following it, and this bait swims with an S action. Right? So swim side to side. And I can actually twitch the tip of my rod and turn this bait around.
Can you really?
And face that fish. And what that does is that causes a reaction. You know, just like if you're throwing a jerk bait, or anytime you're throwing a little shallow square bill and it bounces off of a log and you get that reaction bite, it's the same type of thing. Right? A bass, when he comes up, he wants to eat this bait head first. So they'll come up beside it, you know, right here on the side, and they'll actually try to eat it head first. Well, if he's already swimming back here and you spin that bait around to face him, it just makes his job that much easier, and they react and eat it head first.
Talk to me about, and I think you've already answered this, but when people in my part of the world to the east, from Texas to the East Coast, when they think of swim baits, when they hear the term swim baits, a lot of times what we're thinking of are the big, like Kelly Jordan throws a lot on Lake Fork, the soft plastic swim baits with the lead heads inside.
Yeah, like a hollow belly.
A hollow belly.
Yeah.
These are totally different animal, and the action is really the reason that they're so deadly, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I think swim baits, I mean, I'm thinking, you know, big, you know, Huddleston type baits or
Show
Roman
us how
baits.
big that they can get.
Well, I mean, I've got one right here that I've thrown. I mean, I've caught them on Florida. This is 9.5 inches, weighs 6.5 ounces. And I mean, they'll eat this. I mean, like I said, I've caught them in Florida, I've caught them in Tennessee. It doesn't matter, you know. And there's all different styles. Right? I mean, I've got very small ones in here, but I still consider that more of a swim bait than a hollow belly. You know, to me, a hollow belly is kind of like a big plastic worm. I mean, it is a swim bait, but there's just something about baits like this that just create that draw power. Right? I mean, and it's everything to big topwaters. I mean, the last tournament I fished on Lake Fork, I caught a 6-pounder on camera on this bait right here, and this is just like a big Rapala X-Walk or something, a big walk the dog style bait, but it's bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's 6-7 inches long, big heavy bait.
So it's a big, enticing target that represents an easy, high-protein, high-calorie meal for a bass that's looking for such a thing without having to expend a lot of effort. It's got a very tantalizing action, and you can do things with that bait that you really can't do with a lot of other baits, like turn it around to face the fish. So obviously it's got a lot of drawing power, as you say, but it's probably not something that a guy like me knows how to fish very well. How do you fish a bait like this?
Well, the biggest thing is identifying ambush points.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing with swim bait fishing, is understanding the angles and how those fish are positioned. And that can be created by docks, lay down trees, standing timber. One of my favorites is points, if it's got a real steep drop. And you've got to have somewhat clear water. I like to fish it in at least 3 foot of visibility. I've caught them in less than that, but really to get on a good swim bait bite, 3 foot or more of visibility is good. And you want to visualize how those fish are positioned. And a lot of times I'll actually cast my bait deep and bring it up shallow. Because what happens a lot of times is you'll get fish that will follow a big swim bait. Like I said earlier, they're curious creatures. They're an opportunistic feeder, so they'll follow that bait, not really knowing if they want to eat it, or they might not even be hungry, but they're following it and they'll show themselves. But what happens when you bring that from deep to shallow is it makes those fish commit. They realize that they're going to run out of water. If it's coming out over deep water, they can just follow that bait and then they can just dive down and they're comfortable again. So that's one little trick that you can bring it back up and make them eat it that way.
Obviously, you're only going to throw that on certain rod and reel and line combinations. What are those?
I'm throwing it at least on a 7.5, most of the time, 7'9", heavy action rod. I'll throw it on like an Abu Garcia Veracity, very heavy action rod, because you're talking 2, 3, 4 ounce, 6, 7, 8 ounce baits, and you got to have a big rod for that. You're dealing with big fish, big hooks, and then I'll throw it on a reel that has good size handles on it. Abu Garcia's got one coming out. I can't talk a lot about it yet, but it'll be released, I believe, ICAST, that is designed for swim bait fishing. It's a low profile reel, but it holds a lot of line, because I'm going to throw 20-pound test at least, sometimes 25-pound fluorocarbon. I throw trilene, 100% fluorocarbon, where it's got a little bit of stretch, but that fluorocarbon helps keep the bait down. It's clear. You're fishing these swim baits in a lot of clear water, so you want that invisible line.
Now, let's talk about the times of the year that this is going to be effective. Obviously, if you're going to be up in very shallow water and pulling it back in, it's not all year long that fish are going to be very close to water that's that shallow.
For me, I'll match the styles of baits to how the fish are positioned. Mm-hmm. So say that fish are relating closer to the bottom. Your buddies have been catching them on football jigs or something. Well, what you can do, and I don't actually have any of that style in this box, but a Huddleston. It's a soft plastic type swim bait. It's got a boot tail on it. Very subtle, slow moving action. All the action's in the tail and the back end of it. Mm-hmm. But you can creep that red along the bottom. And so you almost fish it like you would a jig, but you're showing those fish something that is more realistic, and it's a bigger meal for them. So your buddies might be catching 4-pounders out of a school, and you might catch the 5, 6, 7, 8-pounder out of the school. So you're drawing those bigger fish out.
Now I know this technique. I don't know that it originated in California, although I think that is where it originated, if I remember correctly. But these types of baits, especially ones that look like rainbow trout, they're very popular in particularly Southern California and the lakes that have the very large upper teen, low 20-pound largemouths that get that big by feeding on the rainbow trout that are stocked. is a bait that big going to work in a lake, say like Lake Fork? There are gizzard shad, there are yellow bass, there's a white bass that obviously largemouth are going to key on, but that's a pretty big bait for most fish. So they don't shy away from a bait that size, even on the East Coast.
No, because you think about it, an 8-pounder's an 8-pounder. Right? I mean, he weighs 8 pounds. He's got to eat the same amount of food per day that an 8-pounder does on the West Coast. So if they can do it in one swipe versus chasing down a ball of shad that's diving all over the place, they're going to try to do it. Now as swim baits have started evolving, guys in the East Coast have started realizing the potential of catching big fish. You see a lot more baits like this. It's called a bull shad. It's built to look like a shad and swim a lot like a shad. So it's you can see it's a 4-piece bait. It's got 3 joints in it. And it's a very fluid motion to it.
It looks just like a gizzard shad.
And it looks exactly like a gizzard shad, and that's what they're trying to do. So there's a lot of guys on the East Coast that are starting to hand make these swim baits to look like shad, and more shad profiles than the trout profiles. And as I've gone to the East Coast and fished the East Coast more, I've started kind of dabbling into those types of baits. But what I've learned is if a bait has the right action, they're still going to try to eat it, right? Because they see that opportunity and they're going to take advantage of it.
So it's the action, maybe then followed by the size, and maybe followed last and least by the color that really matters to the fish. I guess what I'm saying is a southern or an East Coast bass, a Texas bass, it's not going to have any trouble eating a rainbow trout.
No. Like I said, I mean, this is painted to look exactly like a rainbow trout. I can promise you, Florida does not have rainbow trout. And where I caught them in Florida on this bait does not have rainbow trout. But they still ate it. And I mean, it's not like I was catching 1. I was catching 5, 6, 7 a day on this bait, which most guys are like, man, you're only catching 5 a day. But I was catching 5 a day, and they were all, 5 to 10 pounds.
Right. Yeah, it is a big fish bait, no question about that. Now, one thing that you mentioned, many of these baits, you can buy baits like this at Bass Pro Shops, some of them, but a lot of these baits are custom made. You're going to have to track these people down through their websites, through word of mouth, that type of thing to find them. So it's almost like there's a little cult of swim bait enthusiasts.
Especially on the West Coast side. I mean, there's some guys, small groups of guys that have swim baits that never hit mainstream market, that you would never even see. You just have to meet the right people and get in that network. So, I mean, there's actually kind of a swim bait underground world that goes on. But a lot of the social media networks have started to kind of, put out a lot of these swim baits. Instagram's a big one for swim baits.
Swim bait underground.
Swim bait underground is actually, that's a social network of guys. Swim bait underground, and there's a lot of companies that have kind of taken hold of that swim bait mentality. Big Bass Dreams, those guys they've almost started a movement based around chasing big fish, big bass with big baits. I mean, because once you start doing it, it becomes very addictive.
I can see how it does because I like catching big fish. Now, let me ask you, does that ever run counterintuitive to what you need to do as a tournament angler?
Yeah.
In that sometimes you can get caught up in chasing big fish and you end up not catching enough fish to get a good sack to the scale. Your job as a tournament angler is not necessarily catch the biggest fish in the lake, but to catch the 5 best that somebody brings to the scale on any one day.
And it's really hard to kind of keep that balance because I know as a swim bait angler, I need to keep that in my hands all day long. If I want to get the biggest bite I'm going to get, I need to just throw that bait all day long. But some areas, some lakes, just you're not going to get that many bites. So a lot of times what I'll do, Table Rock was a perfect example. Fished a tournament there earlier this year, finished 8th, and my plan was I would go and I would catch a limit on a jerkbait, catch a decent limit where I knew that I would kind of keep myself in the hunt, and then I would spend the last 3 hours of the day throwing nothing but a swim bait. And I would usually get one opportunity to put, a a 5 to 6 pound fish in the boat, and that really made the difference for me of a 40 to 50th place finish and having a top 10. It was just that one bite.
Let's talk about how that might play into your first ever Major League Fishing experience this week at the Major League Fishing Geico Selects here in northeastern Oklahoma. Obviously, you'd probably get left in the dust if you came out throwing that from the word go against these guys that are going to be throwing things like jerk baits and other baits and catching smaller fish. But if you found yourself behind in the third period and you needed to catch up in a hurry, that might be an option for you to make a lot of ground up very quickly.
Yeah, my mind's been racing thinking about this Major League Fishing deal with, how can I take this box of aquarium art and apply it to Major League Fishing.
I like that aquarium art.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. And it's really tough because it's a numbers game, but you also have to have size, right? I mean, a guy, he can be catching 1-pounders, but all of a sudden I catch 5 5-pounders. Well, he's got to catch 25 of his 1-pounders, and so really for me it's going to be just play by feel. This box never leaves my boat. It'll be in my little 18.5-foot Major League Fishing boat out there, and I mean, if I feel like we're on a body of water where I can make it play, I'll have one tied on the deck. I promise you that. And a lot of times I'll just have it on my deck and I'll see an opportunity. I'll see one of those ambush points, and this will be the first thing that I throw in there. Because I know everybody out there that's watching has time and time again, made a cast, caught a 2-pounder, and as they're reeling it in, they see the 6-pounder falling behind it.
Yep.
Well, so what I've learned is I take this bait, I throw it in there first, I catch the 6-pounder, have the 2-pounder follow it out. He's twice as dumb. He swims back in there. I throw something else in there, and I catch the 2-pounder.
Couple of last questions. Guys like me, weekend warriors who don't fish for a living, who fish for fun, and fish and dream about being like you guys, what's the biggest mistake we make when we try to throw a swim bait like that?
Probably fishing too fast. I see a lot of guys, they'll make a couple casts with it and they'll fish it real fast, and then they kind of get discouraged. I mean, it's a big bait, and you're going to get a lot of followers, and it's getting those fish, getting them to commit, right? But it's something that you have to commit to as well. And I mean, you go out when you're not in a tournament, just pick a bait that you have confidence in, and just go out and throw it. I mean, go and fish it in all the places that you would normally fish, a spinnerbait or a crankbait or something else, and see what happens. Just experiment with it, because, I mean, right here in Oklahoma, lakes not far from here, I've caught some giant sacks on some of these swim baits in this box.
Let me ask you this. I know your career compared to some guys is relatively brief because you're a young man who's been highly successful in your career so far. But have you already developed that one moment that stands out above all the rest with this bait? A big fish maybe somewhere, maybe a tournament that turned on a fish that was caught on this bait, maybe a fish that you lost on this bait.
I would say this year at Table Rock was probably one of the coolest ones, just because it was the first day of the tournament, and I went with my game plan. I went and caught a decent bag on a jerkbait, had 13 pounds or something, and I knew that'd be okay. Had a couple hours left. I went down. I actually pulled up to this 2 big lay-down trees that I found that sit way over deep water. Perfect ambush point for a big one. And I actually threw my jerkbait over these trees. I made 5 casts with a jerkbait over these trees. Nothing. I said, man, something just tells me I need to throw this swim bait. Had kind of a little ripple on the water. Sun was shining. It was just perfect for it. And so I pulled it out. I pulled this bait right here out. And my marshal looks at me and goes, "There's no way you're going to catch a bass on that thing." I said, "I promise you, dude, those teeth marks are not made by me." And I throw it out there. I said, "Stand up here real quick and watch this." And I mean, it was very first cast with it over those trees, and I was kind of showing him, how this bait swims and how it works. I mean, you could see 16 foot down at Table Rock. And I'm showing him how it works. I see this thing? I can twitch it and I can spin it around, make it dart side to side. And the second time I twitched that, a 512, I know how much she weighed because I weighed her, comes up and eats this bait just plastered sideways in her face. I mean, it was stuck to her face like this, like she had a mustache. And I mean, I just cranked her in, and I boat flipped her in the boat. And my marshal's freaking out. I'm freaking out. I'm like, that was the coolest thing ever, you know, because I got to see it. He got to see it. And, I mean, that made him a believer instantly.
Well, you've done a pretty good job of making a believer out of me. I may have to risk some expensive aquarium art when I head to Lake Fork the next time.
That's worth it.
Brandon, I tell you what, thanks for the lesson on swim baits.
Yeah, not a problem.
It's Brandon Palaniuk, one of the major league fishing anglers. He's bringing techniques like this to the MLF format of the game. It'll be very interesting to see what happens this week and the Geico Selects here in northeastern Oklahoma. For more, go to MajorLeagueFishing.com.